Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Sharu with a Astro Weather update for Friday, May 10th. Uh, the moon is going to be in the Vedic constellation Pushya, and this is one of the best days out of all 27 possible Vedic constellations to start anything. And pretty much anything that you do is said to just grow and flourish, right? And even when the astro weather is particularly bad, you could just do something and start an important activity on this day and Pushya and be guaranteed that success. And Pushya means to nourish ultimately, and its core energy is this Shakti of creating spiritual energy. And so it's this idea of constant growth and constant flourishing and abundance. So yeah, Friday, really great day to start a new thing. Yes, pretty excellent. And the reason why is because it's ruled over by ultimately the guru, right? Brihaspati. And so it's symbolic of the guru or the priest doing the fire ritual, creating that spiritual energy, that Shakti for the community. And it's almost like a phone line straight to God, right? You're able to have a stronger connection to that divinity and to that divine energy to create that sattvic, to create that pure energy in your life. So really incredible day to start a new thing and just to go out and have fun. It's Friday night. Friday, just have a great time. And so at the same time, we're going to have Venus crossing over into sidereal Aries. And it's this really volatile point that we talked about before. Thanks, Kristen. Yeah, well, it just so happens that my moon's in Pushya in this constellation. So, I'm all about the teachings and creating that spiritual energy. But really good to see you, an old friend from Bloomington, Indiana. Instead of going to India, I went to Indiana, and that's where I started my whole thing. And so good to see you, Kristen. Anyways, Venus is going to be crossing into Aries. And so it's this really volatile point between Pisces and Aries called the Gandanta point, which is this karmic knot, right? And so the energies of that planet can feel lost or like in this deep hole, right? Where did it go? Right? So Venus is a planet of our emotions, our relationships. And so some people can feel like, oh, where did my love go? Where did my happiness go, right? But just relax, it's all good. It just is going to go there for like 24 hours and should be through by the end of the night, Friday night. And so, don't worry about it too much. But in any case, Venus is going to be in Aries, right? So it's that real big, passionate love that we want to have. It's like that springtime love flame, right? So, maybe just take it slow with any kind of romantic relationships during this phase. And it goes all the way till June 4th. So all of May is going to be that hot and fiery Venus. Pretty cool. All right. So we're going to have Jennifer on the line today. So let me go ahead and pull her up on the old Skype here. And yeah, let's give her a call. Whoa, what's up, Harsh? Hi.
Hello.
Hey,
Hi.
how you doing?
I'm doing good. How about you?
Great. And so
Good.
super synchronistic is that the moon that I just talked about is in the same exact constellation that your Vedic birth star is, Pushya.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. And so that is symbolic. The stars in the sky form a cow udder, right? And so it's like the milk of the mother. It's the center of Cancer, right? So you have this like Maha identity of the mother, right? Yeah. And so having a kid, which you did and recently-ish, like how old is she now?
She just turned 6.
Okay, 6. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, a big part of your identity has been kind of like resolved in a way by being a mother potentially. I don't know if that's been true for you, but yeah, can you relate to that?
I can for sure. It's yes, and it's also been challenging for me. I love it, but it's also been challenging in certain ways, just to surrender to it and slow down and
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it's a thing. It's quite a
Mhm.
thing. uh, yeah, so why don't we just look at your chart here? Just continue to go into it, because it's really valuable to see it from this perspective. Uh, and so you also have the south node here, K2, and so it's this real. Uh, it's symbolic of a body without a head. And so it's just more of withdrawing from the world and more, it can be very introspective, right? So it brings this like, here's my needs and feelings with moon in the first house, but maybe like, oh, but, you know, don't look at me or, it's okay. Like, it's all about you a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
Can you can relate to that?
Hmm.
Yeah. And so, yeah, but it just creates more of this introspective spiritualizing quality of the self and being more uh, like I want to almost be like hidden from view. And you have a lot of that going on in your chart. You have 4 planets in the 12th house, and the 12th house is also places removed from society, right? Removed from the public eye. I mean, how long have you been in Nevada City?
10 years.
This is my first time seeing your face, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Right. Um, so interesting. Uh, and and so there's a lot of energy up here, which we'll get into how this can be expressed, right? Um, and then yeah. So at this point, I just like to say like, okay, well, what did you want to get into today? Like, what did you want? Like, what inspired you to want to have your chart looked at?
Um, it's hard for me to pinpoint one thing. Something that has is coming up for me though, as you're saying that about the introspective side, I definitely have that. And then I also have this really social side where I thrive on
Yeah.
social interactions,
Mm-hmm.
and it feels like this constant push pull within myself to keep that balance. Like if I'm too social, I get really just kind of this strung out feeling and just kind of anxious.
Yeah.
But and I need that time alone to kind of reset my energy, but then too much alone time and I just get way into my head and just yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so it's just this constant balancing act that I find myself in.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Uh, so with that, basically, it's just looking at the your psychological profile here, and you have Venus really close to the Sun as well. If we look at your chart here, uh, you'll see Venus is 4 degrees or like almost 5, and the Sun is at 0 degrees. So when you were looking up in the sky when you were born, you couldn't see Venus, right? Because the Sun was behind it. And so it's almost
Hmm.
like really identifying with relationships and social interactions, but maybe feeling like a lack of fulfillment uh, inside with it in a way. Um,
It's
and
that.
yeah, and then also you have Venus retrograde as well. And so there's this like overflowing quality of this like emotional energy ultimately and like relational energy. And so you already have that really strong, right? So perhaps getting involved with groups for a longer period of time, it's like, okay, that's too much because I'm already overflowing and, you know, um, and then also just that need for like that introspection. And
Hmm.
then just as well, Cancer almost like doesn't have boundaries as much, right? It's just like expansion into consciousness. Um, and so that could be another thing too. It's like, okay, just enough to reaching your limits, and then having to take a step back. Uh, yeah, does this make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. Um, and so yeah, with all this energy here in the 12th house, so we'll look at career because I know that that's a big thing when you become a mother. It's like, whoa, totally disorienting to like what is used to be happening, right?
Hmm.
And so looking at that, uh, so we'll look at the ruler of the 10th house, which is career. And so for you, that's Aries, which is ruled by Mars. And so you have Mars up here in the 12th house. And so a lot of times it's careers with like uh, working in even like hospitals or like taking care of people in this way, like hospice work even. And the moon, or excuse me, Mars is also in this Vedic constellation Punarvasu, which is the mother goddess, right? And it's all about giving support to people,
Hmm.
like creating environments for things to thrive. And so that's a part of it as well. And then we also look at the sun, and the sun is also up here in the 12th house as far as career goes. And it's also at the 0 degrees. And so what that does is it also makes for this more transitional, not quite like present in like physical reality in a way of like what that expression of your sun, of your light is. And so a lot
Hmm.
of times people get involved in that transitional kind of work or transformational kind of work, right? And that's how they can find like, oh, that's what it is. I am transformation. I am that, you know, e- expression. And so, yeah, it's almost like having your kid. Then it's like, okay, this big identity of the mother and being the caretaker, and then that triggered more of that introvertedness, more of the introspection, which is only natural. Um,
Hmm.
and so, yeah, basically, it's what kind of career or actions were you into before?
Well, I've always been really interested in architecture and design,
Hmm.
and but not so much in a traditional sense. Um, More creating sacred spaces, and that is some work that I do, working with this mystery school, helping to create the space for events.
Hmm.
That's something. It's not a career, but right now just a labor of love that I'm doing,
Yeah.
and basically creating the space to help facilitate transformation,
Hmm.
like you were talking about.
Yeah.
So always have had a deep connection with space and home. It's also for me, home is something that's been a little bit elusive, even though
Yeah.
I've lived in the same house for 10 years, and I've always been pretty stable in my adult life of my stable living spaces, but it's not never quite what I'm wanting. This I'm kind of wanting this beautiful, serene
Yeah.
home, and it's always kind of a little bit chaotic and
Hmm.
just not what I'm doesn't feel like what I'm striving for.
Right. Right.
Something that's elusive.
Hmm. Yeah, and the basic indicator of home for everybody is the moon. And so you have it with the south node, which is like this eclipsing point, right? And
Hmm.
so wherever the south node is, it creates this like constant dissatisfaction and it's because it's like going for this like spirituality or going for divinity, right?
Hmm.
But we only have like the bricks and the mundane stuff, right? And
Yeah.
so it takes constant effort in that way. And especially Pushya, the middle of Cancer, that is ultimately the guru or like the priestess, right? And
Mm.
then whenever you have Moon with the South Node, that's also like the priestess, right? And so, yeah, and then all this right here, this is like ashrams and temples, the 12th house. So everything is up in that zone. And so the more that you could bridge that spiritual realm and that temple realm into the physical, then you could feel satisfied with your career and your offering in the world. Because otherwise, when people are like, what are you doing? You know, you have to have a means of expressing that. So Of course, like artistic and dance as well. Expression is another way to do it. But it's all about bridging that infinity into the physical, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and that's pretty consistent in so many different ways with your chart here. Um, and so I think if you just really like focus in on that, and just bringing that elusiveness and that spirit into the physical, then you would feel satisfied, right?
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah. And so there's all different ways to do it. You live in Magic City,
Hmm.
so it's a lot easier to do that with like-minded community in that way.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and then also this is really strong too. Is you have Jupiter retrograde, which is like also very much like obsessing over spiritual things, right? When planets go retrogrades, they tend to obsess over it more. And then you have it in the sign of the teacher, Sagittarius, but more specifically in the Vedic constellation Mula, which is the root. So it's like, what's the root truth of things? Oh, really powerful. And it's in the sixth house of service, right? So you're like serving the guru, serving the priestesses and such, and just going down into the root of creation, right? And even Mula is associated with like the root of progeny, the root of like having children, right? In all of creation. It's the place in the sky that's the center of the galaxy. So it's like
Hmm.
the root of our whole system. And it has that Kali energy, right? Of like just going straight to the cutting the head off of the illusion of the physical, right? So you have that so many times going on in your chart there, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, so yeah, it's tricky. Uh, but once you really get into like expressing that in the physical plane, right? Then yeah, you could probably feel fulfilled and satisfied more.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I think it's interesting that we don't really know each other, and
Yeah,
but a lot of what you're saying is what I'm already doing to a certain extent. Like I said, working in that mystery school and
yeah,
just basically being of service. It's a priestess thing, serving the priestesses basically, and
yeah.
so that is it, because being a mom, a lot of my other pastimes I haven't had time for, but that's one thing that I've been maintaining, and at least I have space for that work,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
even no matter how busy I get.
Mm-hmm,
So,
mm-hmm.
um,
And so what would help you feel like satisfied in this kind of expression? Like what would be the next thing for you, or like what feels lacking?
well, that's actually I can answer that. It would be bringing that practice when I'm in that temple space with other women, or it's very easy for me. But bringing that back home and having more of a consistent daily practice at
Mm.
home,
Mm-hmm.
creating that temple space at home as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what happens is I just get kind of caught up in the mundane, just
Right.
everything I need to do, and I don't prioritize creating space for that when I'm for myself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Basically, I can do it for other people, but creating that space for myself is
Right.
not as easy. So
Well,
that's felt like that's where I need to be focusing.
yeah. And even just 5 minutes a day of something that you do every day will
Hmm.
then create that habit and that structure that will then start to like ooze into the rest of your life, right? So if you can just commit to like one thing for like 5 minutes, even if it's like holding your daughter, be like, okay, this is what mommy and daughter do. We do this work, right? And
Hmm.
um, yeah, I'm gonna, yeah, I was gonna say, you have to stay here with me. Um, I when I do it, I just like do my thing, and my son's like, cool, like fire, and
Hmm.
yeah. So just like
Yeah.
make it playful for her and fun for her,
Hmm.
so that you could commit to that every day. And there's a magic to even just like the same thing, some kind of routine. It's just like 5 minutes, whatever it is, and
Yeah.
the impact it creates in the rest of your life. Right. So that could be a
Yeah.
way. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, looking at your cycles here. Uh, so you've been in this sub cycle of Saturn, um, but also just the major cycle of Venus. Um, and so the Venus is like a lot of that temple work, uh, making home a temple, and also the retrograde is like, and the combust Venus, it's like, home isn't quite reaching my fulfillment, right? I can't quite feel the access that. And so, yeah, the more that you could bring it down into the physical reality, then it'll start to have more weight, and you'll feel that fulfillment to have something like in front of you to reflect upon, right?
Hmm.
And then also Venus rules the 11th house of spiritual, or excuse me, of community. And so it's the same thing, like working with almost like medicine people too. I find that this constellation at the beginning of Gemini, Mirgashira, is like looking for the sauce, looking for that nectar of immortality. And so that's a part of it as well. And that's a part of your identity too with the sun. So it's like looking for that nectar and that fulfillment in that way. And so with the subcycle of Saturn that started July 2016, then it creates like, okay, there's this big homework assignment in community, right? And wanting to really commit to this bigger, consistent mission to serve the community. And it can also feel a little daunting, and sometimes Saturn can like block the energies in a way. And you can feel like delays and obstacles with expressing that with the community. But when you flip it around and really commit to it, then it ends up being like, okay, you're just really committed to it and steadfast in it. And so, yeah, does that make sense or kind of line up for you?
It does. One thing that's kind of coming to mind is I was in this drum group for a long time,
Oh yeah.
and that's something that I just absolutely love.
Mm-hmm.
And the group's just kind of just faded, people move, and it's not really happening so much anymore. And that is another area that I realize I need to evolve and
Mm-hmm.
express that in a different way.
Yeah.
And
Right.
and I don't know necessarily how what you just said relates with drumming, but I don't
Well,
know.
well, it just seems like there's like this restriction happening in community with Saturn there,
Hmm.
right? And so it's just about understanding what the almost like what the extra work is to be able to make it express more. Um,
Hmm.
and so this phase goes until it's almost done in September 2019, and then it goes into the Mercury subcycle, and so you have the Mercury really strong in that it's in its own sign of Gemini, and so it's like getting more into different kinds of medicine work is a part of what that constellation is about, and also really uh, expressing that temple work, that priestess work, in a big way. Mercury rules the third sign for your chart, which is self-expression and communication. So it's involving that, like communicating these higher states of awareness and consciousness, and Mercury as well. Yeah, also just it rules the whole 12th house here, so it activates this like big part of where all of your energy is dwelling, right? So this phase goes all the way till July 2022, and so yeah, it's more about expressing, communicating, and yeah, that like self-expression of these higher states that you are a part of. So that is the the phase that uh, and again, it's like up in the 12th house there, so it's like bringing that down, right? Bringing that down into a physical expression so that you can feel fulfilled and other people can experience it, right? But it should be a big relief in a lot of ways. A lot of times, people going from a Saturn to Mercury cycles, it's like things lighten up a bit, and there's a lot more movement available. So, and you have Mercury really strong. Um, so, yeah, are you considering traveling? Because it would be indicated there.
Um, I mean, I'm open to it, but I haven't thought about it too much.
Cool.
Yeah, but it seems like a good idea.
Yeah, yeah. It's
I mean,
definitely,
what's the time frame that you're talking of?
well, that September 2020 to July 2022 is
Okay.
a phase of this 12th house really being activated, and 12th house is international travel.
Okay.
Yeah. Uh, and so it, yeah, perhaps traveling for those kind of like spiritual pilgrimages and such,
Mm,
could be a part of it. But yeah, just more artistic expression, more dance, uh, less of feeling this like responsibility, which Saturn creates for like the last almost 3 years, you know.
yeah.
And it's more like light. Like Mercury is playful, and it's one of the fastest moving planets, and so it's a lot more movement, and so yeah. But yeah, does that make sense?
It does, definitely.
Cool.
Yeah. I have been feeling that Saturn energy for sure. It's just kind of heaviness and responsibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And so also the eclipse points in the spring equinox moved into the eclipses will be happening in your 12th house for the next year and a half. And so that's going to,
That's
what?
Oh, that sounds a little unsettling.
Right. Yeah, but ultimately it's going into that more mystical or shadow work realm within the priestess work. All right. So it's like getting even more occult and mystical. Yeah. But and also it just creates this whole like you know, revolutionization, is that a word? Of your identity.
So,
Yeah. Right. And so it's like redefining yourself in a really big way.
yeah, that's that. I do that. I was thinking that when I was just thinking about what I wanted to ask you about is I feel like I'm reinventing myself, like that's coming soon. And right now I'm just in this kind of weird phase before that happens of almost a little bit of ego death type of a space
Yeah.
before I reinvent myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a little uncomfortable.
It is. It is. I know. I'm going through it too. I know a lot of people are, and it's tricky, because what's going on is this really kind of more extreme transit where Saturn is being eclipsed all the way through October, and it creates this, gosh, like the work and the forward moving things that we usually do in the structure just isn't working as much anymore, you know.
Hmm.
And so it's getting us to be dissatisfied, right, with the normal way things are going.
Hmm.
So, but and it's interesting because we're still being called to work and to do something, but we want it to be this perfect, idealistic thing. So, uh, yeah, it's just finding that middle ground. And luckily for someone like you and like how you operate, it's easier to express that, right? Because you're doing more of that higher spiritual work, you know.
Hmm.
So I think finding that realm or that introspective realm and then expressing it outward. I said that like 10 times already, but
Must be important.
yeah, I think that's the way. Yeah,
Okay.
cool.
Yeah.
All
Thank
right,
you. This all is making a lot of sense. So
good,
yeah, thank you.
cool. Okay, great. Well, do you have any other questions or anything else you wanted to look at?
Mm, Gosh, nothing really that's coming to mind.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. All right,
I
great.
mean, I do have one thing, but
Sure.
I don't know if it's really, it might be a little bit silly, but I don't, oh, that's my other dog. I have this dog back here, but this isn't the one I'm talking about. My other dog, he's my, just my best friend. I've had him for a long time, and he got he almost died at the beginning of February and was sick for a couple months, and now he's about back to normal. But I was just curious if something like that would show up as a transit or right there at the beginning of February.
Yeah, it
I
could.
don't, yeah,
Yeah, it's pretty nuanced at that point. So like
yeah, I understand that.
the sixth house is pets, um, and so I mean there is eclipses happening around that time, and
Hmm.
that always creates like really wonky energy. Uh, so yeah, well that I think that the second eclipse was the one, and
Hmm.
that was in your sixth house where the pets are, right? So, I
Interesting.
mean, it could just be direct like that. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's interesting.
yeah,
All
cool.
right.
All right,
Thank you.
sure. Okay, great. Well, thanks for
Okay.
coming on. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so
nice
much.
to meet you.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay. Bye
all right.
bye.
Blessings. Bye, everybody.